She thought she controlled the narrative until I released the truth. My name is Adrian Castillo. I had taught at Brookdale High for 15 years, and I believed I understood how stories worked. In school, the loudest voice often won. The calm voice rarely did. I was known for being calm. When the assistant department head position opened in early March, most people assumed I would apply. I had seniority, strong reviews, and steady results. I cared about the students more than titles, but I would be lying if I said I did not want the job. Lauren Whitmore wanted it too. She had joined our department 3 years earlier. She was sharp, confident, and always prepared. She smiled often, but her eyes measured everything. I respected her at first. We worked well together in meetings. She asked smart questions. She spoke with bold certainty. Still, something changed when the promotion was announced. Her tone shifted. She stopped sharing lesson ideas. She watched me more closely during staff discussions. I told myself I was imagining it. I focused on my students. They needed stability, not staff politics. I had no idea that while I was planning lessons and grading essays, someone else was planning something very different, and that plan was already moving. The accusation came on a Tuesday morning in April. I remembered the date clearly because it was the week before spring break. My first period class had just ended when the principal called me into his office. His voice sounded tight. When I stepped inside, Lauren sat in the corner. Her face looked pale and serious. She would not meet my eyes. The principal folded his hands on the desk. He said a formal complaint had been filed against me. Lauren claimed I had made an inappropriate comment to a student during class the previous Friday. For a moment, I did not understand the words. Inappropriate, complaint, student. They felt heavy and unreal. I asked what I had supposedly said. The principal read from a printed statement. The words sounded twisted, like someone had taken a simple classroom joke and bent it into something ugly. My chest tightened. I knew I had never said anything close to that meaning. The principal told me I was being suspended immediately while the board reviewed the case. Lauren finally looked at me then. Her expression was calm, almost rehearsed. By lunchtime, my access badge no longer worked. A security officer walked me back to my classroom so I could collect my bag. Students whispered in the hallway when they saw us. No one explained anything to them, but rumors spread fast in high school. I felt their confusion and fear like heat against my skin. Inside my classroom, everything looked normal. Desks were lined up neatly. The whiteboard still held my notes about persuasive essays. It felt wrong that the room could look so peaceful while my career cracked apart. I packed slowly. My hands shook. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw Lauren at the far end, speaking with 2 teachers. She stopped talking when she noticed me. The teachers avoided my eyes. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to shout that it was a lie, but I said nothing. That afternoon, an email went out to parents, stating that I was on administrative leave pending investigation. It did not explain details, but it did not need to. People filled in the blanks on their own. By evening, my phone buzzed with messages I was too afraid to open. The narrative was already written. The days that followed felt like standing outside my own life. I stayed home while the school continued without me. Lauren stepped in to cover my classes. I learned that from a colleague who sent a short message. Hang in there. The board scheduled a disciplinary hearing for the following Thursday. That meant I had 9 days to wait. 9 days of silence. I replayed every second of the class Lauren mentioned. It had been a normal Friday. We discussed metaphor and tone. A student asked a playful question about exaggeration in advertising. I made a harmless comment about how words could be twisted to sell anything. That was it. At least, that was all I remembered. On the third day of my suspension, I received a copy of Lauren's written complaint. It was detailed. She described my tone and body language. She claimed several students looked uncomfortable. The more I read, the more I felt trapped. Her version sounded polished, intentional, like she had practiced it, and the school board believed her enough to remove me without hesitation. She controlled the narrative, for now. On the fifth day, I met with my union representative, Carla Bennett. She had handled difficult cases before, but even she looked concerned when she read the complaint. Intent matters, she said, but perception can be powerful. I told her again that I had not said what Lauren claimed, not even close. Carla asked a simple question. Were there cameras in your classroom? I blinked. Of course there were. The district had installed an automated recording system the previous year. It began during remote learning and stayed in place afterward. Every class session was recorded and stored in a secure digital archive. Teachers could not edit it. Administrators could not alter it without formal request. The system ran automatically. I had almost forgotten about it because I never needed it. Carla's eyes sharpened. If that system recorded the full period, we need the footage. My pulse quickened for the first time in days. If the recording existed, it would show everything. Every word, every moment. Truth, preserved without opinion. Lauren had built her story carefully, but stories could fall apart when faced with evidence. And I finally had something real to hold on to. Carla filed a formal request for the classroom recording the next morning. The district policy was clear. Archived footage could only be accessed through written petition during an official investigation. The hearing was still 5 days away. That meant we had to wait. Waiting became its own kind of torture. I checked my email every hour, even though I knew nothing would change quickly. My mind kept jumping between hope and fear. What if the system had failed that day? What if the audio was unclear? What if something harmless looked wrong without context? Lauren, meanwhile, moved freely through the school. A colleague told me she had been calm in meetings. She spoke about protecting students. She nodded when others praised her for stepping up during a hard time. The board postponed the promotion decision until after the investigation. That sounded fair on paper, but everyone knew what it meant. My name was already stained. On Monday afternoon, Carla called. The footage has been secured, she said. It will be reviewed during the hearing. My throat tightened. Have you seen it? No. It stays sealed until Thursday. So the truth existed somewhere in a digital archive, locked, waiting to be played. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I kept replaying Friday, April 4th, in my head. The class began at 10:05 a.m. Students entered in small groups. I greeted them like always. We discussed tone in advertising and how words could shape meaning. Lauren had claimed the comment happened near the end of class. I tried to remember if she had entered my room that day. Teachers sometimes stopped by between periods. The bell rang at 10:55 a.m., and students packed up. My memory blurred after that. Morning arrived too soon. The hearing was scheduled for 3:30 p.m. in the district conference room. I wore the same navy suit I had worn at my last evaluation. I wanted to look steady, even if I felt anything but. Carla met me outside the building. Stay calm, she reminded me. Let the evidence speak. Inside, the room felt colder than it should have. The superintendent sat at the head of the table. 2 board members were beside him. The principal sat near the end. Lauren entered last. She carried a folder and wore a quiet, serious expression. She did not look nervous. The superintendent began by summarizing the complaint. He read Lauren's statement aloud. Hearing it spoken in that formal tone made it sound even worse. The words felt sharp, like they had edges. When he finished, he turned to me. "Mr. Reyes, do you deny this allegation?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded steady, even though my heart pounded. "I deny it completely." Lauren spoke next. She described the moment as if she were reliving it. She said she had stepped into my classroom briefly and overheard the comment. She claimed several students looked uncomfortable. Her voice trembled at the right moments. She paused before certain phrases. It was controlled emotion. Carla requested the archived recording for April 4th, first period, 10:05 to 10:55 a.m. The superintendent nodded to the district technician seated near the screen. He logged into the secure system using multiple passwords. The process took several minutes. The room was silent, except for the soft clicking of keys. Then the screen lit up. Timestamp: April 4th, 10 hours, 5 minutes, and 12 seconds a.m. The video began to play, and my future hung on every second. The footage showed my classroom from a wide angle. The camera captured my desk, the whiteboard, and most of the students' seats. The audio sounded clear. Students entered, laughing and talking. I greeted them as usual. My movements on the screen looked normal, calm, ordinary. We moved into the lesson. I wrote phrases on the board. I asked questions. Students answered. Nothing felt out of place. At 10:47 a.m., the classroom door opened. Lauren stepped inside. She smiled at the class and said she needed to borrow a folder from my desk. I nodded and continued teaching. It seemed like a brief interruption. The video showed her standing near my desk longer than I remembered. She looked toward the students and made a light comment about how persuasive language could make anything sound good. A few students chuckled. Then she left. At 10:51 a.m., a student asked about exaggeration in advertising. I responded with a simple example about how words could twist meaning. The sentence matched my memory. It did not match her complaint. The board members leaned forward. Lauren's posture shifted slightly. The recording continued. The technician paused the video at 10:52 a.m. The superintendent rewound it by 30 seconds and played it again. My comment was clear. That's why we have to be careful. Words can twist meaning if we are not honest. There was no inappropriate language, no suggestive tone, no reaction of discomfort from students. Instead, the footage showed something else. When Lauren stood near my desk at 10:48 a.m., she had said, "See, with the right spin, you could make even a boring story sound dramatic." Her voice was louder than mine at that moment. The student near the front laughed and repeated part of her phrase jokingly. I had not even responded to it. I was writing on the board. Carla asked the technician to replay that segment. This time, the focus was clear. Lauren's earlier comment, spoken casually, contained the phrase she later claimed I had said. The room grew very quiet. The timeline did not support her version. It contradicted it, and the contradiction was recorded in perfect detail. Lauren's calm expression began to fade. The superintendent asked the technician to continue playing the footage without interruption. No one spoke. The only sound in the room was my recorded voice explaining the lesson. At 10:53 a.m., a student raised her hand and asked if advertisers ever crossed ethical lines. I answered carefully, saying that honesty mattered and that twisting words could hurt people. My tone was steady, My words were clear. There was no hidden meaning, no strange pause, no nervous laughter from students. Instead, several of them nodded. One student even said, "That makes sense." The video ended at 10:55 a.m. as the bell rang. Students gathered their things and left in normal fashion. Lauren did not return to the room after her brief visit. The superintendent leaned back in his chair. One board member folded her arms. Another scribbled notes quickly. The timeline was simple now. Lauren had entered at 10:47. She had made a comment about spin and drama. I had spoken later about twisting meaning in advertising. Her complaint claimed I used her exact phrasing in a harmful way. But the recording showed the opposite. The source of the phrase was not me. It was her. Carla spoke calmly. The archived footage confirms that Mr. Reyes did not make the statement described in the complaint. In fact, it suggests that the phrasing originated from Miss Whitmore during her visit to the classroom. Lauren straightened in her chair. "That's not what I meant," she said quickly. "Context matters. Tone matters." The superintendent looked at her carefully. The tone appears instructional. The words are consistent with a lesson on persuasive writing. Lauren's voice sharpened slightly. Students felt uncomfortable. One board member glanced at the technician. "Do we have student statements?" The principal cleared his throat. "We received no formal complaints from students or parents." Silence filled the room again. I felt something shift inside me. For days, I had carried a weight of fear and shame. Now that weight began to lift, replaced by steady clarity. The evidence did not depend on memory. It did not rely on emotion. It was simple, time-stamped, unedited. Lauren's earlier confidence had faded. She avoided looking at the screen now, as if it had betrayed her. But the screen had not betrayed anyone. It had only shown the truth. The superintendent requested a short recess. We stepped into the hallway while the board reviewed the footage privately. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. Carla stood beside me. "You did well," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "The recording did." Lauren remained inside the room with the principal. Through the glass panel, I saw her speaking quickly, her hands moving as she explained something. The principal listened, but did not nod. 10 minutes felt like an hour. When we were called back in, the mood had changed. The superintendent's voice was firm. Based on the archive recording, the board finds no evidence supporting the allegation against Mr. Reyes. The words settled over me slowly. No evidence. The suspension would be lifted immediately. My record would reflect that the claim was unsubstantiated. Then the superintendent turned toward Lauren. "However, the board has concerns regarding the accuracy of your written statement." Lauren's face lost its color. For the first time since this began, she looked uncertain. The narrative she had built was beginning to crumble. The superintendent continued speaking in a measured tone. "The complaint describes a statement that the recording shows was not made by Mr. Reyes. It also omits your own comment, which contains similar phrasing." Lauren swallowed. "I was trying to protect students." "From what?" one board member asked gently. Lauren hesitated. "From inappropriate language." "But the recording does not show inappropriate language," the board member replied. The principal shifted in his seat. "Perhaps there was a misunderstanding," Carla responded calmly. "A misunderstanding does not usually involve a detailed, written accusation." The room grew tense. The superintendent announced that a separate internal review would begin regarding the complaint itself. Lauren would be placed on temporary administrative leave during that review. The irony was sharp. A week earlier, I had been escorted from my classroom. Now Lauren sat silent as the same process unfolded around her. No one smiled. No one celebrated. This was not triumph. It was correction. As we stood to leave, I glanced once at the screen. The blank monitor reflected the room back at us. It had recorded everything, and it had changed everything. When I walked out of the building, the late afternoon sun felt brighter than I remembered. Carla shook my hand firmly. "You'll return to work Monday," she said. "Official notice will go out tomorrow." I thanked her, though words felt small compared to what she had done. That evening, the district sent an email stating that the allegation against me had been investigated and found unsupported by evidence. It did not mention details, but it cleared my name. My phone buzzed again, but this time the messages were different. Colleagues apologized for doubting. Parents expressed relief. A few students wrote simple notes. "We knew you wouldn't do that." I read each message slowly. The following Monday, I walked back into Brookdale High. The halls looked the same, but something had shifted. Conversations paused when I passed, then resumed with quiet greetings. In first period, when I entered my classroom, several students began to clap softly. Others joined. I raised my hand for quiet. "Thank you," I said. "Let's get back to work," because that was the truth. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. And this time, the truth had spoken for itself. Returning to routine should have felt simple, but it did not. Every sound in the hallway seemed sharper. Every glance lasted a second longer. Even though the board cleared me, the memory of the accusation still lingered in the air. I focused on structure, lesson plans, rubrics, clear expectations. I wanted my classroom to feel steady again. Students acted normal, but I noticed small signs of loyalty. They answered questions with more energy. They stayed after class to talk. One student said quietly, "I'm glad you're back, Mr. Reyes." I nodded and thanked her. Lauren did not return that week. An internal investigation had begun. The assistant department head position remained open, suspended like everything else. By Friday, the principal asked to meet with me privately. He apologized for how quickly the suspension had happened. "We had to follow policy," he said. "I understand," I replied, and I meant it. Policies exist to protect students, but I also understood something else now. Stories move fast. Evidence moves slower. If the recording system had not existed, the outcome might have been different. That thought stayed with me longer than anything else. The following week, the board conducted interviews with staff members. I was asked to recount the events again, this time in detail. I described the lesson, Lauren's entrance at 10:47 a.m., and the exact words spoken. Consistency mattered. The technician confirmed that the archive was secure and automatically stored off-site. No edits had been made. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the school schedule. Lauren submitted a written response claiming she felt uneasy about the classroom atmosphere that day. She suggested that even if the words were not exact, the spirit of the comment was inappropriate. But the recording did not support that claim. 3 students from my class were asked to provide statements. Each described the lesson as normal. One mentioned Lauren's quick visit. None reported discomfort. As the days passed, I sensed that the investigation was no longer about confusion. It was about intent. Why file a detailed accusation without confirming facts? Why omit your own role in the exchange? The assistant department head decision remained frozen, and the timing of everything felt less like coincidence, more like strategy. Midway through May, nearly 6 weeks after the accusation, I was called back to the district office. This meeting felt different from the first. The tension was quieter, more controlled. The superintendent summarized the findings. The internal review concluded that Lauren's complaint contained significant inaccuracies. The omission of her own statement during the class was considered misleading. She had been offered the option to resign. She accepted. The decision would be announced at the end of the week. The statement would be brief, citing professional reasons. I listened carefully. There was no anger in me now, only clarity. The board also reopened the assistant department head selection process. Applications would be reviewed again, based solely on qualifications. As I left the office, I thought about how close everything had come to falling apart. A single narrative, delivered with confidence, had nearly erased 15 years of work. It had taken one recording to restore balance, but the damage from those weeks would not vanish overnight. Trust rebuilds slowly, just like truth. The resignation announcement went out on Friday afternoon. It was short and formal. No details, no mention of the investigation, just a polite farewell. Staff reactions were mixed. Some were shocked. Others were quiet. A few avoided discussing it at all. In my classroom, I did not bring it up. Students heard rumors, but I redirected them to their assignments. I did not want my room to become a place of gossip. Still, I reflected on what had happened. Lauren had been talented, ambitious, capable. I wondered when ambition had turned into something else. Had she believed her own version of events? Or had she trusted that emotion would outweigh evidence? I would never know. What I did know was this. The recording had not only cleared me, it had exposed the fragility of assumptions. Without proof, even strong reputations can crumble. With proof, even powerful accusations can fall. The promotion interviews resumed the following week. I submitted my application again, not out of pride, but because I refused to let fear rewrite my future. The narrative had shifted, and this time, I had control of my own. In early June, I sat across from the board once more. This interview felt steadier. The questions focused on leadership, curriculum planning, and student growth. No one mentioned the investigation directly. Still, it hung in the background like a lesson no one wanted to repeat. I answered clearly and without bitterness. I spoke about transparency, communication, and accountability. I emphasized that strong systems protect both students and staff. After the interview, I returned to my classroom and continued teaching. Final exams were approaching. Students worried about grades, not politics. A week later, the principal called me into his office. He smiled this time. The board had selected me as the new assistant department head. The decision, he said, was based on experience, performance, and professionalism during a difficult situation. I thanked him and shook his hand. Walking back to my classroom, I felt something settle inside me. Not victory, not revenge, just resolution. The truth had not needed shouting. It had needed patience. And when the moment came, I had simply released it. Summer arrived quietly after that. The school year ended without drama. Students turned in textbooks, cleaned out lockers, and rushed toward vacation plans. On the surface, everything looked normal again, but I had changed. During the final staff meeting, I spoke briefly about strengthening our classroom recording policies. I suggested clearer guidelines for how footage could be accessed during investigations. The board members nodded in agreement. Systems mattered, not because they assumed guilt, but because they protected truth. Over the break, I organized curriculum plans for the fall. As assistant department head, I now had more responsibility. I reviewed lesson pacing, updated assessment rubrics, and scheduled teacher workshops. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I replayed that April afternoon in my mind. The cold room, the glowing screen, the timestamp reading 10:47 a.m. One small moment had nearly rewritten my entire career. I realized something simple but powerful. Silence allows false stories to grow. Evidence forces them to shrink. When August approached, I felt ready, not just to teach, but to lead with a kind of steadiness that cannot be shaken by whispers. The new school year began with fresh faces and cautious optimism. As assistant department head, I now attended leadership meetings every Monday morning. I listened more than I spoke. Trust takes time to rebuild, even after you are cleared. Some teachers quietly thanked me for handling the situation with dignity. Others seemed embarrassed that they had believed the accusation so quickly. I did not hold it against them. Fear moves fast in institutions. One afternoon, a new teacher asked me about the classroom recording system. She wanted to understand how it worked. I explained that it ran automatically and stored footage in a protected archive no one could edit without formal approval. "It feels strange," she said, "being recorded." "It can," I replied, "but it protects you too." I knew that truth firsthand. Students sensed the shift in my role. They asked about my new responsibilities. I told them leadership was simply service with more paperwork. The promotion did not change who I was in the classroom, but it did strengthen my voice in meetings. And this time, when I spoke, people listened more carefully. In October, the district held a training session on professional conduct and documentation. I was asked to help present. Standing at the front of the conference room, I felt a quiet sense of purpose. I did not share personal details about what had happened. Instead, I focused on principles, clarity in communication, accurate reporting, and the importance of reviewing evidence before drawing conclusions. I emphasized that accusations must be taken seriously, but so must facts. Several staff members approached me afterward. They said the session felt honest and balanced. One teacher admitted she had learned not to rely on hallway conversations for truth. That mattered. The experience had taught me that reputations are fragile, but integrity is stronger. It can bend under pressure, but it does not break easily when rooted in honesty. I sometimes wondered where Lauren had gone after her resignation. I did not search for answers. My path no longer crossed hers. The story had reached its conclusion, not with shouting, not with revenge in the dramatic sense, but with exposure. And exposure, I learned, is powerful enough. As winter approached, Brookdale High settled into a steady rhythm. The chaos of the past year felt distant, almost unreal. Yet the lessons remained sharp in my memory. I kept a printed copy of the district's recording policy in my office drawer, not as a reminder of fear, but as proof that systems, when used correctly, protect fairness. During one leadership meeting, a board member mentioned how the archived footage had preserved institutional integrity. I recognized the careful phrasing. They wanted to prevent future crises. I appreciated that. Students from that April class were now seniors. One of them stopped by after school to ask for a recommendation letter. As we spoke, she said, "I'm glad everything got sorted out last year." "So am I replied. She smiled. We knew the truth would come out. Her confidence struck me. Teenagers notice more than adults think. When she left, I looked around my classroom. The desks were aligned. The whiteboard was clean. The room felt steady again, and this time, so did I. Looking back, I understood how close I had come to losing everything I worked for. A single accusation, delivered with confidence, had shifted opinions overnight. It taught me that narratives can feel solid even when they are built on weak foundations. But I also learned something stronger. Truth does not panic. It waits. On that April afternoon, when the recording played at 10:47 a.m., I realized that facts carry a quiet power. They do not shout. They simply stand. Lauren believed she controlled the story. She trusted that emotion would move faster than verification. For a short time, she was right. The board believed her. I was suspended. Whispers filled the halls. But the archive held something she could not rewrite. When the screen lit up and the timeline unfolded exactly as it happened, control shifted instantly. Not because I argued louder, not because I fought harder, but because I pressed play. And when I released the truth, it spoke for itself. Thank you for listening. This is the end of my story.